All right, welcome everyone. This is an exciting session on seeing if your APIs are actually agentic AI ready. You know, we've been working with a lot of clients and helping them with their overall API maturity and governance. And then recently, I would say last 6 months, there's been a lot of demand on, saying, okay, we have our APIs, they're ready. We want to now start exposing them to, agents, and can you help us? And this is a little bit of the story of how we've gone about that, what we discovered along the way, and what potential problems and their solutions we have. So this is also going to be a live demo of something that we have built to help clients make their APIs more agentic ready. So with that, let's jump in. My name is Naresh Jain. I'm the founder and CEO of Specmatic, and you will see more of that as we go through. So Specmatic itself, as you know, is been helping organizations build and govern really high quality, I would say AI ready APIs. The way we do that is by transforming your API specifications, obviously help you design your API specifications, but also then transform them into executable contracts. And as you can see, we do support a whole variety of protocols. MCP is the latest addition to this, and so we do support MCP as a protocol. And really, I mean, our vision was to build a no-code solution that allows people to do contract testing, that allows them to do service virtualization mocking, and then also backward compatibility. This is something that is quite unique to our offering. And we've been fortunate enough to battle test this with several large organizations, and you'd be happy to know that the MCP piece, which we recently added, of course, OpenAPI and WSDL was already open source, but MCP is also open source, and folks can go ahead and use the MCP Specmatic for contract testing their MCP servers. So with that, let me give you just a little bit of a context of what we have always tried to do and how that extends into the agentic world and also into the MCP landscape, right? So for those of you who are familiar, the core value proposition of Specmatic is we take, any specification, it could be OpenAPI, Async API, or GraphQL SDL, and we, for the provider, for the consumer, we convert that into service virtualization, which means if you have a spec, you can have a running, service, a virtual service, a mock of that, and you can start your development, you can start your testing. You don't need to wait for the provider to provide it. But if this was only what we did, then obviously the providers may not adhere to the specification, which means that whatever the consumer is testing may they'll be in for a surprise when they come to integration testing, right? So what we also do, which is the in my opinion the other side of the coin, is we take the very same specification, we automatically generate a whole bunch of contract tests, both positive and what we call as resiliency tests, and then we fire that against the actual provider to make sure the provider is adhering to the specification. And so we balance the two sides of the equation and make sure that the provider and the consumers are always in sync, right? And this is how we avoid API drift and other kinds of problems. But when we zoom out, we do strongly believe in an API design first kind of an approach, where we, once you have the API specifications that are collaboratively designed by the provider and consumer, we, check them into a central repo. It could be Git, it could be Redocly, it could be your choice of tool, but our suggestion is there is a central source of truth where everything goes in, right? And if you are using Git, then you would go through a standard pull request process. You would do linting, you would do example validation to make sure your examples in the specifications are in line with the spec itself. You would run backward compatibility, and now you might say, hey, I've not even written any code, how would you do backward compatibility testing, right? That's kind of what I mentioned earlier, is quite a unique value proposition. So what we do is we would take the new version, the incoming version of the specification, we would run that as a mock, right? And then we would take the existing version of the spec and run that as test against this mock. If all the previous tests are passing, then we know the new spec is backward compatible with what was already there. If any of the tests fail, then you know it's not backward compatible, right? So that's a kind of a simple idea, but actually very powerful. And so that's backward compatibility. Once you're good with backward compatibility, you review and merge the change. Once, as soon as the change is merged, then the providers and consumers can now start parallel development, right? So which means the consumer could, use service virtualization from Specmatic. It would pull the latest version from the central repo and give you a virtual service against which you can start your development. Same for the provider. They can generate the contract test and run against their service, and they can almost do a test driven development kind of a cycle where the tests are freely generated for you. When you're ready, you can go into a continuous integration environment where you can run your component test, and wherever you depend on the provider, Specmatic will do the service virtualization for you. When the provider goes into CI, they would run the unit test, and then they would also run the contract test and make sure that all the contract tests are passing, which means your implementation is in sync or adhering to the specification. And if each one followed this, when they came to integration environment, we wouldn't expect any surprises. Hence, the path to production should be seamless and smooth, right? So this is kind of the core value proposition of what Specmatic has been offering all these years. Is a true shift left all the way to design, enhanced developer experience and improved collaboration, something that allows people to locally do development, but also in CI, and seamlessly work through all of them. We have a lot of data that shows that by following this kind of approach or a methodology, you can massively shrink your time to market because of the parallel development, and also the APIs that you're building are very heavily resilient and so forth, right? So this is kind of the core value proposition that Specmatic offered, and a lot of our clients who've been using this, have seen the benefits, and this is where now they started coming back to us and say, okay, this is great. We now have a very stable APIs. Now we want to move to the next level, right? Which is basically we want to expose these APIs to an agentic workflow. We want, we want like to have true AI to be built on top of it. Now, whenever you're thinking about something like this, the main question you need to ask is, how do you know your APIs are agentic AI ready, and how have you validated that to be confident, right? And unfortunately, at least 6 months ago, when this question, when we would ask this question, most of them would like, well, we don't know, we'll figure out, right? And trying to figure out things in production is probably quite expensive and troublesome. So, but you need to ask yourself, like, what is the main shift here, right? So when you think about it, traditionally API clients were dumb, right? And there was no intelligence in them. So the programmer would program it exactly as per the spec, and then things would be perfectly fine. There was no dynamism or intelligence, or something changing at runtime. You basically, what you code is what you see. But with agentic AI, something is quite different, right? Clients are not dumb, right? Like there is real intelligence in this agentic clients. There are a lot of things that which you had to engineer for earlier can actually now be avoided, and there are things that you could get away earlier. For example, you could put things in the description and stuff like that, and people could read and interact and make sure that they can kind of interpret these things and make sense out of it. AI may or may not do some of those things, right? So we need to be careful around some of these things. In fact, there was another talk that I gave where we looked at 200 MCP servers, and we found a lot of them having like very similar patterns in terms of issues in them, right? And so you need to be careful around when you're designing these things. There are a lot of interesting checklists that are out there in terms of how do you optimize your APIs for AI agents, and my challenge has always been like we have these wonderful checklists, but not many times people actually go through, or they're not easy ways for us to actually validate whether your API is actually doing what it's supposed to do or not. So, in my opinion, like the best way to figure some of these things out is to actually try it out in a safe environment where you can simulate the whole thing and see for yourself, right? So let me kind of quickly jump in and kind of show you a live demo in two parts, right? Part one, we don't have a API and we want to design something from scratch, but we want to make sure that that API is agentic AI ready, right? And in part two, we will look at essentially, I already have an API. How do I make sure that that is agentic AI ready, right? So let me quickly jump here. Let's come here. So let me just come here, and let's say I would like to design an API which kind of meets this requirement, right? So this is something I want to expose to an agentic workflow where I want the ability to manage and execute e-commerce orders, and each order, basically you can create an order with specific product details, or you can retrieve an order by order ID, right? So there are these two main kind of capabilities that you want to expose, and there are some specifics in terms of how do you create, what information do you need, and so forth, right? So with that, what I'm doing is I'm basically sending in this as a prompt to Genie, which is a product that we built, that will essentially look at the prompt, understand the prompt, turn it into an API for you, and then you would be able to play around with it. So cool. As we spoke, we already see that, there were like, if you remember the prompt that we gave, we said we want to be able to create orders, right? So we want to create orders where we take an array of products, we take a region, and a few other details. So it's gone ahead and created that, and also we should be able to retrieve a specific order details, right? And so you would see that we've created a specific example for a product with some details. So now what I would be able to do is I would be able to interact with this API in natural language and kind of play around with it and maybe try out different business use cases that I have. So let's say here again you will see a quick summary of what capabilities it has. So let's say fetch order details for this ID, right, which I just picked up from the example that we had. So when I do this, what it's going to try and do is it's going to try and request this details, and it fetch it back, right? And you saw this little log thing popped up over here. And so if you see, this request that we made just got converted under the hood to a get request on orders with the ID that we gave. It got this results back, and then whatever results it got back, it's converted again into a human readable format, and it's given us, right? So this is a very simple interaction where we are trying to retrieve some product details, right? Similarly, we can create, we can create a new order. I'm not sure what is required to create a new order, but let's just fire that, and we would now figure out what are the things that we need. So clearly, Genie is saying, hey, if you want to create a product, you need to give us a list of products, the product IDs and the quantities. You would have to specify the region in which you want to create, whether it's a corporate order or not, and stuff like that. So perfect. Let us try and give it a shot. So create a new order for, let's say, India region without any discounts. Uh, so let's say create a new corporate order for India region without any discounts for with these products. All right. So what are the products? I'm just going to say ID P1234, and quantity is let's say 10. And let's add another product just to make sure this is doing what it needs to do. I'm just going to give some other, and let's hit enter with that. So now I'm requesting Genie to help me create a new product, and there we go. As even before I could finish the sentence, Genie has gone ahead and helped us create a product with these two products, and it's got back a product ID for us. And surely, again, you can go back here and look at the logs, and you would see that it made a post request to slash orders, and this was the things that we had sent it, and it created those orders and got an order ID back, right? So clearly, I can also now say, this is where again, like some intelligence kick in. So we say get orders that. Get details by a provided ID, or we can even say, for example, fetch order details of recently created order. Spell created order, and it has memory, so it would be able to figure out what was the ID, and so it went ahead and fetched the order of the recently created order ID, right? So this is great. So I can look at one order at a time, and I can create orders. But what if I wanted to fetch a whole bunch of orders, right? List all the orders one shot. So let's try that. Fetch all orders. And what we will see, again, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we might start with a certain use case. As we play around with this in a safe environment, we might realize, oh, you know what, I need some more some more functionality. And so here it says, sorry, the capability does not exist. So let's do this. So we would say add the ability to list all orders, and let's go ahead and do this. So what I'm now doing is I'm basically asking it to this specification only had these two endpoints for us. So I'm essentially asking it to update the API itself to add a new endpoint which has the ability for us to retrieve or list all the orders, right? And you might be wondering, how is all this working, right? So essentially what's happening here is we are talking to an MCP that Specmatic is exposing for the specific API that we want. And behind the scenes, it has it's basically has a fully working service that it has basically created on the fly. And so we are now interacting with like a virtual service that is running behind the scenes. On top of that is an MCP, and then we are interacting with that MCP via this, right? And this is, of course, hooked up right now to OpenAI. I think it's 4.1 at this point. We're going to upgrade to 5. And what you would see is that, as we were speaking, it's gone ahead and completed this thing. So it's added the ability. So now you'd see this new list all orders has been added, which retrieves all the available orders. So let me go ahead and say list all orders here, and let's see what happens. And there we go. There's only one order in the system. Again, we can go here and you'd see the newly created API, the get/orders is what got invoked, and it got one order back. So it kind of displayed that, right? So, this is kind of in a nutshell, like this whole process of like starting with a set of requirements, creating an API for it, playing with it, making sure it works. Then we realize, hey, I need a new use case. We kind of ask it to enhance the API with that use case, and we kind of play around with this back and forth, right? And when we are happy with this whole thing, and we say, okay, this looks like this meets all the business requirements that I have. This API is quite quite tuned to what I would like to expose to an agent. Then you can pop in here and you can say, hey, go ahead and publish this as an MCP server for me, right? And so what this will do is this will take the the API that we just created, and it would create an MCP for you, which will basically then talk to a service. So in this case, it's a brand new API. Maybe the code does not exist. We can also use Specmatic to generate that, but in this case, all we are doing is generating the MCP. And as you can see that this is in progress, it should probably take less than a minute, and it will publish a Docker image for you. This would allow you to then take the Docker image, point it. So when you start the Docker image, you can pass in where your actual API endpoint is, and you can have this MCP running, which will expose the exact functionality that you have now tested and designed. That is now going to be available to agents or other use cases that you might have, right? So this is kind of in a nutshell. There we go. So it has gone ahead and published it. You can also go here, pop in, and you can see that this is now available. This was published less than a minute ago, and so now you have MCP server which you can use to take this use case and test it out, right? So this was the part one of two parts, right? Part one where we are designing a completely new API, right? From a business requirement, and we went all the way to an MCP server. But what if I already have existing API, and I want to publish that, I want to expose that to agents. But before that, I want to make sure that it does what I expect. So what I had done is I essentially uploaded an API which is for managing a conference. So this is an existing API that I have that allows me to list all conferences, create new conferences, and a whole bunch of functionality, right? So this is an existing API. I might look at it and I might say, you know what, I'm not quite comfortable right now to expose any of the functionality that changes anything in my conference system, right? So for example, I may not want any of the post requests at all, right? And that's fine, right? So to me, one of the things is you don't want to blindly expose everything that you have to the agents, right? You want to be careful around what you want to expose based on what use cases you might have, right? So in this case, you might say, hey, you know what, please go ahead and remove all the post methods from this API, right? So what I'm asking Genie to do is, I'm not comfortable yet to expose like give the ability for someone to create a new conference, or for someone to be able to add attendees through an agentic workflow. I might only want to start maybe exposing like a read-only functionality, right, which basically allows you to fetch the details and stuff like that. So effectively, I'm asking Genie to help me refine this API and fine tune this API, if you will, which will only cater to the requirements I might be comfortable right now exposing to an agent. And I might also want to then actually play around with it and make sure that from an end-to-end workflow point of view, whether I'm able to complete everything or not. Maybe if I'm not able to complete like what we saw previously, I might be able to go ahead and update the specification itself, right? So this obviously is going to take a little while. What it's doing behind the scenes is obviously it's going to update the spec itself. It is going to make sure that it is able to keep the correlation between these different entities that exist over here. It's going to bring up the MCP, and also it's going to bring up the virtual service behind it, against which the MCP can be used to simulate the entire flow, right? So some of these things do take time. It also ensures that the once the service is up, it comes. So it looks like, okay, we ran into an error, but that's okay. We can just kind of fire this again and see what happens. Sorry about that. So let me just go ahead and ask it to try and do this. But I think you get an idea. This should basically come through, clean up, and then we should be able to publish the refined spec as an MCP itself, right? So that's kind of the main idea, is that you have a environment in which you can play around with the actual API. When you're comfortable, then you expose this as an MCP to the agents. So let's kind of quickly finish off the rest of the things, and then hopefully this should come back. So let me kind of go there. Uh, I think a couple of questions that people generally ask is, when I'm creating an API or things like that, does this create the API according to the organizational standards, right? So you would be able to, give in like your rules, which basically says, hey, this is how I want my API to be designed, and Genie would then honor those rules to basically make sure that. The other common thing that you would often find is that you may already have certain entities when you're creating. So, like in the past, when we created this commerce application, we created an order object, or we created like an order object, and you might say, you know what, orders or already exist in my uh, like my repository. So I don't want you to create a new order from scratch. Can you refer to that? Absolutely, right? So Genie should be able to look up your existing JSON schemas, and pick the schemas from there if it already exists, if it fits the use case. So that like a whole bunch of reuse is a very important aspect as well. See if this is completed. Okay, so there we go. The API specification has got updated, and you see all the posts requests have now been stripped out. And this might be a good thing. So I might say now list all conferences, and this should go through talk against. Yeah, so you can see that there are two conferences, Agile India and API Days India. So those are the two conferences it's able to fetch and then get these details to us. So it looks like, okay, I'm happy with this, and I should be able to go ahead and publish this as well as an MCP. And with that, you'd in like less than a minute, you would have an MCP ready, which you can use, right? So I think that's kind of the main idea here. Let's just go through that, and I believe, yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to communicate today. So thanks again for taking the time and watching this video. If you have any questions, here are my handles to reach me out, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye.